Help me reach 1,000 subscribes. Support the video with a like and leave your thoughts in the comments. I read every comment. Thanks. I never thought laughter could end a marriage, but that night it did. James stood in the doorway of the kitchen, shoulders tense, keys still in his hand, and asked me the question he'd been circling for months. Do you still love me? It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't loud. It was almost polite. And I laughed, not because it was funny, but because it felt absurd. Love, to me, had become an old word with no weight. I didn't see his face change right away. I just heard the silence after my laugh, thick and heavy, like something had snapped without making a sound. James and I had been together 11 years, married for 8. From the outside, we were stable. Good jobs, a clean house, dinner most nights at the table. People called us solid. I used to believe that was enough. James was dependable, predictable, always there. He handled things. Bills paid on time. Car service before it made a noise. He remembered birthdays, anniversaries, the little obligations adults carry. I respected him. I just didn't want him anymore. And somewhere along the way, I decided that respect should be enough for both of us. At first, the distance crept in quietly. I stopped reaching for him on the couch. He stopped reaching back. Nights turned into routines instead of moments. I told myself this was normal, that passion fades, that comfort replaces it. James didn't complain. That made it easier to ignore. When he tried, awkwardly, to bring us closer again, I brushed it off with tired excuses. Work stress, headaches, early mornings. He accepted them all. Looking back, that patience should have scared me more than anger ever could. If this feels familiar so far, take a moment to like this story so it reaches others who've lived the silence too. I didn't realize how loud quiet could become until it followed me everywhere. James was still kind, still attentive, still trying ways I no longer noticed. I had already checked out emotionally, but I stayed physically. That was my mistake. Staying without loving is a slow kind of cruelty. The night everything shifted wasn't planned. It was an ordinary Tuesday. James came home late, kissed my cheek, and asked how my day was. I answered without looking up from my phone. He lingered, like he was deciding whether to say something. When he finally did, his voice was calm, but there was something brittle under it. He said he felt like a guest in his own life. I told him he was being dramatic. That was the first crack. I saw it in his eyes, the way something closed instead of opening. We went to bed without touching. I slept. He didn't. The next evening, he waited for me in the kitchen, leaning against the counter like he needed it to hold him up. That's when he asked if I loved him. I laughed because the question felt unfair. Love, in my mind, was supposed to be effortless, not something you had to ask for. I told him I cared about him, that things were complicated, that he was reading too much into it. I didn't say yes. I didn't say no. I laughed, and that was enough. Do you think laughter can be more painful than words? Tell me in the comments what you felt in that moment. James didn't raise his voice. He didn't argue. He just nodded, like he'd received confirmation of something he already knew. He asked one more question, quieter this time. Have you been honest with me? I said I had. That was another lie I didn't bother examining. He walked past me, slow and deliberate, and went to the bedroom. I heard drawers opening, closing. I stayed where I was, scrolling, pretending nothing serious was happening. Part of me expected him to come back, to fight, to demand reassurance. He didn't. When he came back out, he had a small bag over his shoulder. He looked older somehow, smaller, like a version of him I'd never seen. Before he reached the door, he stopped and turned around. I hope someday you understand why I couldn't stay, he said. I shrugged. I told him he was overreacting. That marriage wasn't about feelings all the time. That's when he smiled, but there was no warmth in it. That's exactly why I'm leaving, he said. If you were in James's place, what would you have done differently? Comment below and let's talk about it. He opened the door and stepped out without another word. The house felt bigger immediately, emptier. I told myself he just needed space, that he'd cool off and come back. I didn't follow him. I didn't stop him. I didn't even feel panic. Just relief mixed with something I didn't want to name. Later that night, alone in our bed, I replayed the laugh in my head. It sounded cruel now, sharper than I remembered. For the first time, I wondered if I had misjudged the power of that moment. James hadn't left because I didn't love him. He left because I'd made him feel foolish for asking. And that realization didn't hurt yet. Not until I understood what I'd actually lost. James didn't come back the next day, or the one after that. At first, I framed his absence as stubbornness, a silent protest that would eventually fade. I told friends we were taking space. I told my mother he was stressed. I told myself I felt lighter. The house stayed quiet in a way that felt earned, like peace after a long argument. Except there had been no argument at all. Just a question, a laugh, and a door closing. By the fourth day, his side of the closet was empty. He hadn't taken everything, just what mattered: work clothes, shoes, his watch, the practical things. It felt intentional, like he wasn't storming out, but relocating his life. That distinction bothered me more than anger would have. I texted him something casual, asking if he was okay. Hours passed before the reply came. I am. I hope you are too. No emojis. No questions. That was when the unease finally settled in. If this story made you think of someone who might need to hear it, please share it thoughtfully. Sometimes recognition is the first step to honesty. I started replaying moments I dismissed. James cooking dinner while I scrolled. James asking about my day and actually listening. James reaching for me and stopping himself halfway, like he already knew the answer. I realized how many times I'd mistaken his patience for weakness. How easily I'd accepted his presence without offering mine in return. A week later, he came by to pick up the rest of his things. He texted before arriving, precise and polite. When he walked in, there was no hesitation, no searching the room like he missed it. He moved with clarity. We stood in the living room, facing each other like strangers who shared a long backstory neither wanted to summarize. I asked him where he was staying. He said a friend's place for now. I asked if this was really happening. He looked at me, steady, and said it already had. I tried to explain myself then. I told him I hadn't meant to hurt him, that I didn't know when things changed. That laughter was a rejection. He listened without interrupting, which somehow made it worse. When I finished, he said something I hadn't prepared for. I didn't leave because you don't love me, he said. I left because you stopped respecting me enough to tell me the truth. That sentence landed harder than any accusation. Type the word honesty in the comments if you believe silence can be more damaging than conflict. He carried the last box to his car and paused before getting in. For a moment, I thought he might hug me or at least hesitate. Instead, he thanked me for the years we had and said he hoped we'd both learn something from this. Then he drove away, not fast, not dramatic, just gone. I watched until the street was empty, realizing I had finally become the quiet one. The weeks that followed were uncomfortable in ways I hadn't anticipated. Friends asked questions I didn't know how to answer. Nights stretched longer without his steady routines anchoring them. I caught myself reaching for my phone to tell him something mundane, then remembering there was no one on the other end who needed to know. The laugh that once felt harmless echoed back to me now, stripped of its excuses. I understood, too late, that love doesn't disappear all at once. It erodes when you stop showing up honestly, when you choose ease over effort, when you assume someone will stay simply because they always have. James hadn't walked away because he was unloved. He walked away because he finally loved himself enough not to beg. What do you think hurts more, being left or realizing you pushed someone away without noticing? Share your thoughts and let's discuss. I still don't hate myself for what happened, but I no longer minimize it either. I learned that laughter in the wrong moment can sound like contempt, and contempt, even quiet, is impossible to live with. James never asked me again if I loved him. He didn't need to. He listened to the answer I gave without words and acted accordingly. That was his strength, not his failure. And I carry that lesson now, heavier than regret, sharper than memory. If this story resonated with you, like the video, leave a comment answering this question. Would you have stayed or walked away, and why? Subscribe for more stories that explore the moments relationships truly change.